I want to start this video off by saying I haven't thrown up since 2009. And this documentary almost broke my 15-year streak. I want to make it clear that this video isn't really a review of this documentary, but more of my quick, serious thoughts of it all. I would go deep into every little matter that was revealed in this series, but I think it's better if you watch the whole entire show because it's a hard pill to swallow, but it's worth it. Quiet on the Set is a docuseries that uncovers the toxic culture behind some of the most iconic Nickelodeon children's shows of the late 90s and early 2000s. Now, just to be clear, I was born in 2000, so I wasn't there at the dawn of Dan getting to Van Schneider. The first 2 episodes of the series talks heavily on Dan Schneider and his verbal abuse to the writers of the shows All That and The Amanda Show. Shows I didn't grow up with, but still listening to everyone's tale on their experience is still gut-wrenching. People talk about how he favored his men writers over the females, his strange relationship with Amanda Bynes, how his jokes in all of his shows are sexual, but he gaslit everyone into thinking that they were harmless jokes. I mean, look at this. Totally not a sexual joke, right?
Like this.
These are the kind of things we already kind of knew and it was swept under the rug. We know about Dan Wipe Your Tears as For Your Career Schneider and how he's weird, but I think everyone talking about the situation in the series really hit harder than just reading about the allegations. It truly sets this in deeper than it already once was. But there's another villain to the story. What caused me to want to talk about this whole series was the 3rd episode where Drake Bell tells his story about Brian Peck.
It wasn't dealing with anybody on the shows or anything, right?
It was a child actor.
On one of our shows.
Yes.
As a kid, I spent most of my time either watching SpongeBob or Cartoon Network, just strictly cartoons because that's where your imagination goes wild. But as I grew older, I wanted to venture out into sitcoms. Enough of the cartoons, let's try something different. The 2 main shows I watched was iCarly, Victorious, and Drake and Josh, and that latter one was my favorite of the 3, and I just recently did a video on it for its 20th anniversary and rewatched some episodes for the video. And before that, the last Dan Schneider video I did was one of my earliest videos where I explained the universe of all his shows and how they connect. The quality isn't really that good, but anyways, without a doubt, Drake and Josh is my favorite live action show of Nickelodeon, and yet, it's sort of ruined for me now, which is so weird because I remember Drake and Josh to be the most tame of Dan Schneider's shows when it comes to sexual innuendos, but now the rewatchability factor is just kind of tainted. In 2003, a dialect coach named Brian Peck was arrested for unspeakable acts with a 14-year-old. For years, no one knew who this kid was. In the 3rd episode of the series, we hear about Drake's start of fame, how his dad was his manager at the time and tried to keep Brian Peck away from Drake, but it didn't happen because of Peck's manipulation. It caused a snowball effect where Drake would end up at his house every night, until finally, Drake ended up being in a very inappropriate situation with Peck. I know Drake hasn't been the greatest man in the world, but hearing about this really stuck with me. This guy who wanted nothing more to just be on stage and make people laugh ended up on the dark side of the industry. All of these kids in the docuseries ended up on the dark side. Some fired for unfair reasons, one kid discovering that a worker had a relationship with John Wayne Gacy. Yes, I did not stutter. John Wayne Gacy. It's truly disturbing and frightening. Thankfully, Drake said that this happened before Drake and Josh, and that when he was in the role of Drake Parker, he lost himself in the role and had a full-on blast. But knowing that he went through the hardest moment of his entire life moments before that show, kinda makes the show harder to watch now. Similar to Jeanette McCurdy using an art form to expose the horrors behind the scene by writing a book, I'm happy Drake recently released a music video that's an obvious allusion to what he has gone through. Dan Schneider released an apology to all the people he worked with on his YouTube channel, and honestly, I don't think anyone's gonna forgive him on the awful work environment. The entire apology feels so scripted. I really only watched the apology for Tebow though, good character.
These are yams!
I'll take a yam.
No. I'm not selling a yam to somebody that doesn't know her yam from her sweet potato.
If you grew up in the 2000s like me, chances are you watched all of Dan's shows, and then as you grew older saw how weird some things were. If you grew up with these shows, I highly recommend watching this, because while it's heartbreaking, learning that behind the laugh track, dark underlying secrets were happening, it's satisfying to see all these awful people's action come to light. It's just crazy to me because as a kid, I did tons of plays. I want to just be an extra on iCarly, Victorious, Drake and Josh, just to be a part of a Nickelodeon show as a kid. And looking back now, I probably would have never made it big because I'm just some guy in South Carolina, but I'm happy I never got to achieve that dream of being a child star at Nickelodeon. As a 2000s kid, I just wanted to share my thoughts on this well put together docuseries that really shines light on what really went on behind the scenes of the children's shows we loved and laughed with. It's heartbreaking, but it's a documentary that absolutely needed to be made, and my heart goes out to anyone who went through any sort of abuse by Dan, Brian Peck, and others. With that being said, how did the giant foot logo not tip anyone off?
Back at the house, our female decoy is about to say hello to 27-year-old Justin Smith, a video post-production editor who does freelance work for Nickelodeon.
Why don't you just have a seat right there, please? Okay. I need you. Seriously. You're going to want to talk to me. I'm sorry. Trust me on this. Now, you work at Nickelodeon, huh? No. You don't? What's your name?